An 11-year-old girl is dead. Her family is shattered. And this is all after prosecutors say a teen driver killed her while speeding on his phone and blowing through a stop sign. But that is just the beginning. 18-year-old Conner Michael Iversen may now face a felony vehicular homicide charge, but the court records reveal a troubling alleged history. We're going to break it all down with a Minnesota criminal defense attorney right now. It was just before 8 on a February morning when an SUV rolled into a Maple Plain intersection out in Minnesota. 4 kids inside on their way to start the day. And seconds later, a truck barreled through a stop sign, slamming into them. 11-year-old Liliana Loana would never make it to school. Authorities say the driver, 18-year-old Conner Michael Iversen, was speeding, that he was distracted by his phone, and that he went right through a stop sign. 5 members of Liliana's family were injured, and she died 2 days later. Liliana's loved ones described her as a, quote, beacon of sunshine, the heartbeat of her family, a girl whose smile could light up a room, now gone in an instant. It took months of crash reconstruction, witness interviews, forensic analysis before prosecutors filed their case, and the charges against Iversen go well beyond that February morning. We're going to get into that, but I want to take you through how this all unfolded. Okay, so according to the original press release from the West Hennepin Public Safety Department, the crash occurred on February 26, 2025, at approximately 7:56 a.m. And this was at the intersection of County Road 6 and County Road 110. This was in Independence, Minnesota. 3 vehicles were involved here. We have a 2007 GMC Sierra traveling westbound on County Road 6, driven by an 18-year-old male from St. Paul, later identified as our suspect in this case, Conner Michael Iversen. Then there was a second vehicle, a 2016 GMC Acadia traveling southbound on County Road 83, driven by a 41-year-old female from Maple Plain. And then the third vehicle was a 2019 Ram 1500 traveling eastbound on County Road 6, driven by a 56-year-old male from Watertown. Investigators said the driver of the GMC Acadia stopped at the 4-way stop on County Road 83 before entering the intersection, and at that time the GMC Sierra, allegedly driven by Iversen, reportedly failed to stop at the westbound stop sign and collided with the Acadia. Now, the Acadia was apparently occupied by that 43-year-old passenger, 4 children, a 4-year-old male, 2 15-year-old males, and 11-year-old Liliana. The driver, passenger, all children sustained moderate to serious injuries. They were taken to North Memorial Hospital for evaluation, but as I mentioned, unfortunately, Liliana suffered life-threatening injuries, was later transferred to a children's hospital out in Minneapolis, where she passed away. Now, the investigation remained ongoing at that time. Charges were pending. That was until police announced in July that after a comprehensive investigation involving the Minnesota State Patrol's Crash Reconstruction Unit and the Hennepin County's Criminal Information Sharing and Analysis Unit, they were now pursuing a felony-level charge, criminal vehicular homicide, operating motor vehicle in a grossly negligent manner under Minnesota Statute Section 609, 212, 2112. Now, according to the release, evidence included eyewitness statements, scene analysis, crash data retrieval, CDR, cell phone data extraction, and even forensic crash reconstruction. According to the criminal complaint that was reviewed by local media, a crash reconstructionist determined that Iversen was traveling 63 mph in a 50 mph zone a second before the crash, and cell phone records allegedly revealed he was using his phone in the moments leading up to the collision. Witnesses told officers that Iversen didn't slow down as he ran that stop sign, allegedly striking both the Loiano family's Acadia and another truck. This story almost feels like a PSA, right? It is so important to shed a light on this, and I want to thank our sponsor Upside for their support in helping us produce this episode for you. So, Upside is great. It is a free app that gets you cash, back when you buy daily essentials. Pump my gas, I can use Upside. Go out to lunch, I can use Upside. Maybe I get something at a convenience store, I can use Upside. And why not get cash back when I do all these things, right? This is real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you transfer right into your bank account. So once you have the free Upside app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. You pay as usual using a debit or credit card. You follow the steps on the app, you get paid. So, to find out how much you can earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen. But make sure to use our promo code SIDEBAR because you'll get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. All right, so now I want to bring in Joe Tamburino, criminal defense attorney out in Minnesota. Joe, thanks so much for coming on for such a terrible, terrible case. So under Minnesota law, what exactly does the prosecution need? To prove to convict somebody of criminal vehicular homicide operating a motor vehicle in a grossly negligent manner? Well, thanks for having me on. What they have to prove is that Mr. Iversen drove in a manner where he had gross negligence, meaning he had scant care for the safety of others. So for instance, if all of a sudden you're driving, say 80 miles an hour in a 60 mph zone, and you're drinking a cup of coffee, and you're fidgeting with the radio and you get into an accident and hit someone, that's going to be gross negligence. However, if you're driving way above the speed limit in an erratic manner, messing with your phone, going in and out of traffic, that's going to be gross negligence. And that's what they've charged him in this case. They're saying that he was grossly negligent, which means he had scant care over the safety of others. So, do you think it would fit based on the current facts or the current facts alleged by law enforcement that he was going above the speed limit, right? He didn't stop at the stop sign. These are the allegations, and that he may have been on his phone. Is that gross negligence? Have you seen similar cases where someone is charged with this crime for doing something similar? Close to it. I think the reason why they're going for the criminal vehicular homicide in this case is first because of the tragedy of an 11-year-old girl dying as well as Mr. Iversen's horrible record. I mean, he's been charged with fleeing a police officer just several months before this. He's been charged with third-degree assault for allegedly stabbing someone. He's been charged with receiving stolen property. So, the allegations would basically show some type of crime spree within the last year. However, I have seen cases for gross negligence where people are on their phone and doing some other type of bad driving conduct. Just being on your phone might not cut it. But in this case, if the allegations are true, not only was he driving a sufficient amount over the speed limit, but he was also messing around with his phone and going through a stop sign. How can they prove that? What do they look at the metadata of the phone? They see when maybe something was searched or accessed and then compare it to the time of the crash. Is that how they do it? Yes, it happens all the time. It's really not that complex. I have seen cases here in Minnesota and quite frankly around the nation where what they've done is forensically got information that a person wasn't only on their phone, say looking at a map, but they were texting, they were looking at a video on Instagram, they were going through Twitter, something like that, because every time you touch your phone and access an app or access a phone number or anything like that, it will leave a digital footprint. So forensically, they're going to be able to prove that. How strong, by the way, is crash reconstruction evidence usually in court? Can it be challenged? The reliability of it? How does it work? It can be challenged, but crash reconstruction is a pretty solid science. And here in Minnesota, our state patrol, they're the preeminent crash reconstructionists. And what they do is not only go through the whole scene, they collect all the evidence. They render opinions. They get information from the suspect's or the defendant's phone. They do all of that. And then they formalize a report which is given to the prosecutor and then eventually given to the defense attorney and the defendant. Now, a defendant, it's within their right to get their own reconstruction, meaning that if they wanted to, they could send this accident reconstruction report to their own private accident or crash reconstructionist to test the validity of the state patrol's work. Can you just to focus on that point, can the defense request an independent crash reconstruction, an independent phone analysis, and then it becomes a battle of the experts at trial? They can request that, but it's not court appointed, so to say. I mean, it's not like they can go to court and say, we don't want the state patrol to do this. We want to get an independent agency. No, what they would have to do is hire them on their own. So the defense always has full access to the information in the case. Think of a drug case. If all of a sudden the state prosecutes someone for having an ounce of cocaine and the defendant says, no, I don't think that's really cocaine. I want it independently tested. Sure, they could hire a forensic analysis, a drug expert to test the alleged cocaine. And the same in these cases, a defendant could do their own accident reconstruction or crash reconstructionist. They could look at their own phone, They could get their own experts to do it. By the way, this is at the middle of an intersection. You gotta imagine, I don't know if you're familiar with this area, but I have to imagine there's surveillance footage, right? There's gotta be something from CCTV cameras. There could very well be. In Minnesota, we have a Department of Transportation, MDOT. It's called MDOT. And like with many other states, MnDOT has cameras throughout the metro area. You know, they're mostly on state and federal highways. But also municipalities could have traffic cameras, or like right here, right now. I'm in downtown Minneapolis, and there are cameras all over the place. I mean, going through intersections, sidewalks, so there very well could be some type of video evidence. Just taking these allegations as true for a moment, assuming the most. Egregious behavior. Are you seeing a lot of cases of distracted drivers who are on their phones? Yes, there are many cases of distracted drivers on their phones. In fact, this year there is a mayor's race here in Minneapolis, and the incumbent is Mayor Fry, and the challenger is a man named Omar Fate. And recently it was reported that the challenger, Mr. Fate, has had 2 tickets for looking at his cell phone while driving, use of a cell phone while driving. So this is very common where people get ticketed or they get warned for not using their cell phone while they're driving. It's such a problem. I'm driving all the time. I look to my left to look to my right. I saw the other day guy just like this. Just guy like this. Not even, it's like getting worse and worse. And you have this case, right? And you mentioned it before, this is not where the story ends for Iversen, because the jail records show Iversen faces several other cases in Hennepin County, including assault, receiving stolen property, fleeing police. We obtained a probable cause statement from December 17th, 2024, showing that Iversen was previously accused in another case of extremely reckless driving. That statement reads, quote, "On or about December 17th, 2024, at approximately 1526 hours, officers were dispatched to AT-720 Highway 7 Ministra, Hennepin County, Minnesota, for a traffic complaint. Witnesses reported a gray Chevrolet Lumino was passing in a no-passing zone, passing on the shoulder, driving erratic, and pulling into the Holiday Inn in St. Bonifacius. Officers said the vehicle was not stopping. Iversen was identified as the suspect in that case. But look at what he had to say in his post-Miranda statement. Quote, "Defendant stated the cops pulled in behind him and said, 'It was just instant. I just hit the gas as hard as I could. I don't even know why.' Defendant said, 'He gets too crazy when he drives.' He stated, 'This was the 3rd vehicle he's crashed.' Defendant said he was driving and the police started pulling him over, and he said, 'I'm not pulling over. I just drove it until I couldn't drive anymore, which is stupid. I messed up.' Defendant said he saw the police cars behind him. He stated he saw the lights and heard the sirens. And court records show he pleaded guilty to abandoning a motor vehicle. He was only fined $30 as the court records show. The charge was filed as a petty misdemeanor. But for the record, before we go into the rest of his criminal history, Joe, or his apparent criminal history, or what he's been charged with, I should say, Joe, that alone, A, how does that factor into the current case, the homicide case? And B, my gosh, doesn't that tell us something about the suspect? It tells us a lot, and it will factor into the criminal vehicular homicide in this way. Like with any other type of criminal charge, a prosecutor could use prior or other act evidence. It's called. Sometimes those other acts happen before the incident, sometimes after. And many times it involves what's called bad acts or criminal acts. So what a prosecutor could do in the present criminal vehicular case is say to the judge, "Look, judge, we want to bring up for the jury's consideration that he had a fleeing. He was fleeing the police only several months prior to this crash, and I think in many cases a judge would allow that." Now, as we were talking about, Fox 9 is reporting that in total he is facing charges in right now reportedly 5 other cases. So what do we have? We have February 2025, the crash in Independence, allegedly stabbing a man the same month in Golden Valley. April 2025, receiving stolen property in Robbinsdale. May 2025, threatening an ex-girlfriend. Also, in May of 2025, threatening a jail deputy while in the Carver County Jail, allegedly saying, "I will bleeping kill you." June 2025, arrested for another theft at a gas station. These are the allegations. We couldn't confirm everything. from the court records, but I will tell you, Joe, I know you looked at it too. If true, my gosh. I mean, that is such a condensed period of alleged criminal activity. You go back to your point before about how this may or may not play a role at trial. I imagine if he were to take the stand, his arrests could come in, right? I don't know, but I mean, if they're not convictions yet, I'm not entirely sure. But also that condensed period tells us something also about the defendant. Yes. Well, a few things with that. First, his arrests don't necessarily come in unless, as I just previously described, a prosecution makes a motion to bring in other acts. And they bring in these other acts to show the jury that this is this defendant's MMO. It's his method of operation. It's his intent. It's his practice to drive recklessly, to avoid the police, to drive with gross negligence, to not have scant care over the safety of others. So yes, a prosecutor could try to bring all of that in, and then this will have great relevance. If or when he's convicted, because if he's convicted of all these charges first, just on the death case alone, it's a minimum of 48 months. So if he's convicted of that, he's going to be going to prison for 4 years on top of whatever he gets sentenced to all these other crimes, and the statements that prosecutors would definitely want in the alleged statements. I get too crazy when I drive. I'm not pulling over that those statements in and of themselves. They would love to get into a trial, right? And may be able to, I think they will definitely be able to get into those statements because that goes directly into his mind. His statements are a window into his mind in terms of what was he intending, what was his practice, what did he want to do, what did he want to accomplish. So a prosecutor would easily be able to get in those statements. How does a defense attorney or series of defense attorneys handle all the multiple cases? Do they say, hey, listen, we will look at each case and see if we can actually put on a valid defense, or is it trying to negotiate some global plea with respect to all he's facing? Global in an interesting sense, but what are they supposed to be doing here? Well, according to the court records, it looks like he's being represented by the Hennepin County Public Defender's Office. I don't know the exact attorney, but the office seems to be representing him on these cases. So, many times what happens after, obviously, you look at all the discovery, meaning the evidence for each individual case, many times you would try to work out some type of deal where some of this would be dismissed. You would get caps on any type of jail or prison, so that you could tell your client, look, if you go to trial, this could be years and years in prison. However, if we work out a deal, we might be able to stop the bleeding, to do some damage control, perhaps just 4 years in prison. Now, in terms of a defense to vehicular homicide, what could he say? Not that he wasn't driving. I don't think that that's a defense. It's an accident. I wasn't looking at my phone. I didn't see the stop sign. Something fell on the brake and made me go past the speed limit. I'm not sure what a defense is. Many times in these cases, the defense is, I wasn't acting grossly negligent. I was just acting negligent. I should not have done X, Y, and Z. But that doesn't mean that I was grossly negligent. Perhaps I'm guilty of reckless driving. Careless driving. Driving too fast for conditions, whatever it is, that could be the defense. It could be where the defendant would say that he's guilty of something, but a lesser charge than criminal vehicular operation death as a result. This is such an emotional case. It's such a difficult one to talk about when you're dealing with jury selection in a case like this, assuming this actually goes to a trial, a jury trial. Who do you want to select for a case like this? Obviously, I think there's an advantage for the prosecution, but for the defense, there's a huge advantage to the prosecution. What the defense would try to do is simply get jurors who can, to the best of their ability, disassociate their emotions from the evidence in the case. Not to be able to think emotionally about what happened, or to want any type of vengeance against the defendant, but rather look at the black and white nuts and bolts of the actual evidence, because perhaps they do have some type of a defense. But that's extremely difficult to do because jurors are human beings and they are not legally required to check their humanity at the door before they sit in that jury box. So yes, a defense attorney will try his or her best to get them to look at evidence and not emotions, but it's darn near impossible, and this is a huge advantage for the prosecution. And you imagine that the victims, right, the other people who were involved in this crash are going to testify. They could be compelling eyewitnesses. Although it does become a question, right, in a traumatic incident like this, their recollection, their recall, that those are serious issues for witnesses who are in a traumatic event, right? They are, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not admissible. Because when a witness takes the stand, and this is basic rules of evidence, as long as they're able to the best of their ability, know, remember, recollect, and relate the facts or their experiences to the jury, they're allowed to testify. Just going back to the victim here, the victim who died, Liliana, she was a 5th grade student at Grandview Middle School in Mount GoFundMe. Created for the family described her, as I said, a beacon of sunshine, only wanted to help others, that her smile was infectious, her giving nature, generous spirit was, felt by all around her that Lily was the heartbeat of the family. And now, as we wait for this criminal vehicular homicide case against Iversen to proceed in the Hennepin County Court, this family is left trying to pick up the pieces. Joe Tamburino, thank you so much for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.